The calculus teacher pointed to the janitor as a joke in front of the class. But when the man quietly walked up to the board and solved the problem better than anyone expected, it didn't just silence the room, it changed how the entire school saw him. It was Thursday afternoon at Oakwood High in Elkhart, Indiana, the kind of day when students glance at the clock more than the board. Mr. Taylor, the school's calculus teacher, had a reputation for being sharp-tongued, impatient, and always quick with sarcasm. He wasn't liked much, but he wasn't hated either. He was just tolerated. The classroom felt dry, with equations covering the whiteboard, and the air smelled faintly of eraser dust and worn-out shoes. Phones were hidden under desks, some pretending to pay attention, others staring out the window. Then, something happened that changed the whole atmosphere, like a sudden gust of wind. As Mr. Taylor wrote another equation on the board, a faint squeak echoed from the hallway. The janitor was nearby, mopping outside the classroom with his usual slow, steady rhythm. Mr. Taylor paused mid-sentence, glanced at the door, and cracked a half smile. Without warning, he turned to the class and pointed toward the hallway. "Look who's here. Mr. Jenkins, think you can solve this one?" he said, tapping the board with the back of his marker as though issuing a challenge on a game show. Laughter broke out, soft laughter that made you shift in your seat because you weren't sure if it was okay. Mr. Taylor smirked again. "Come on, Terry, you always look like you've got something on your mind." Terry Jenkins, the 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway with his mop in hand. He wore his usual forest green uniform, clean but faded, with Jenkins stitched over his chest pocket. He didn't blink or flinch. He just looked into the room, then slowly he stepped in. The mop leaned against the wall. A few students sat up straighter. Some thought he was about to crack a joke and leave, but he didn't. Instead, Terry walked to the front of the room. "Mind if I try?" he asked calmly, pointing at the board. Mr. Taylor raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead," he said. A few phones slid out from backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he serious?" But no one stopped Terry. He picked up the marker, glanced at the equation, and paused, not out of hesitation, but like he was thinking deeply, like someone reading a familiar map. He squinted just slightly and began to write. No showmanship, no flair, just deliberate strokes, one line after another. The room grew eerily quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the board and a chair creaking as someone leaned forward. Mr. Taylor crossed his arms, watching closely. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Terry broke down the steps aloud, his voice calm and steady. "See, this is a chain rule problem, but the trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you figure that out, it's much easier." He moved like he had done this before, not just the problem, but the teaching. His tone wasn't smug or showy. He explained things simply, clearly, as though he had spent more time teaching than mopping. When he finished, he capped the marker and stepped back. The board was filled with precise, well-organized work. He turned to Mr. Taylor, then to the class. "That's one way to do it," he said, and for a moment no one moved. A junior in the back whispered, "He got it right." Mr. Taylor didn't say a word, at least not right away. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The silence grew louder than any joke he could have made. Terry nodded politely, walked back to the door, and picked up his mop. No applause, no boasting, just quiet confidence, as if he hadn't just turned the room upside down. But as Terry reached for the door, no one expected what would happen next. No one moved for a full 10 seconds. It felt like the class had been yanked out of a dream and dropped into something real, the kind of moment that didn't belong in a high school classroom. Terry Jenkins, as everyone had always called him in passing, was halfway out the door when someone said it out loud. "Wait, he just did that in his head?" It was Wes Hanley, a senior in the front row, who usually didn't speak unless it was about grades. He wasn't joking. His eyes were wide. He looked at the board again as if the answer might have changed. While he blinked, Mr. Taylor finally spoke. His voice was flat, almost irritated. Well, he got the right answer, but his tone didn't carry the usual sarcasm. Something else had slipped in, something closer to confusion or, worse, discomfort. Terry glanced back. "I spent a lot of time with numbers a long time ago," he said, then gave a small shrug. "They never left." A few students laughed, not at him this time, but because the tension was finally cracking. Terry didn't wait for a response. He just left, mop in hand, his shoes squeaking softly down the hallway, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just solved a college-level problem in under 3 minutes without so much as a calculator. "Books first, always," she used to say. "The world will try to shut the door, but if you bring your own key, they can't stop you." Lamar earned that key, valedictorian, state science fair winner, and then that scholarship to Purdue. By his freshman year, he was already tutoring classmates. Professors saw his name on the attendance sheet and paid attention. But then, during his sophomore year, he got a call that changed everything. His mother had collapsed at work. Doctors said it was late-stage cancer. By the time Lamar reached the hospital, she could barely stay awake. "I can take care of it," she whispered. "Don't come home." He didn't listen. He took a semester off, then another. He picked up jobs, warehouse work, night shifts at a grocery store, anything to pay the bills. Classes faded into the background. So did the dream. By the time his mother passed away, everything was scattered. He had no home to return to, no money to finish his degree, and no counselor asking why he hadn't come back. "I kept thinking I'd get back to school," Lamar told Mr. Everett, the principal, "but one thing turned into another. Life doesn't wait for you." The principal sat in silence. The story was heavy, not dramatic, just real. The kind of life you only hear about when you ask. Back home, Lamar kept his transcripts in a box under his bed, along with an old Purdue sweatshirt, an old calculator, and a photo of him and his mom on orientation day. He never touched it, but he never threw it away either. Now, all of it was being dragged into the light again. That evening, he sat on the back steps of his small apartment complex. The sky was dim, quiet. The only sound was the hum of far-off traffic. He sipped tea from a metal thermos and stared ahead. He hadn't thought about calculus in years, not since the last tutoring gig he took before dropping out. And now, here it was again, like an old friend knocking on his door. But one decision had derailed everything he worked so hard for. Back in college, Lamar had promised himself take a short break, get his family back on track, then finish strong. But life didn't bend to plans, especially not the kind built on hope alone. After his mother passed, Lamar returned to Gary, trying to piece things together. His sisters were still in high school, barely getting by. Bills stacked up on the counter. The landlord wanted rent, and no one from Purdue called to ask where he'd gone. He took whatever jobs he could get. Stockroom worker, janitor at a strip mall, overnight security at a shipping yard, anything that paid enough to keep the lights on. School drifted further into the rearview mirror. At first, he called the university now and then, asking about reapplying, transferring credits. They'd send forms, he'd fill them out, but he never mailed them. Something always got in the way. Then came the breaking point. It was late November when a man named Frank Booker, who owned a flooring company in South Bend, offered Lamar steady work. "You're sharp," Frank said. "Don't waste your time pushing brooms. I'll train you myself." Lamar had hope again, a real shot. But the day before he was supposed to start, his youngest sister, Alana, got into a fight at school. A stupid argument that escalated. She'd broken someone's nose. They threatened to expel her. Lamar had to be there. No one else would show up for her, so he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank gave the spot to someone else, and that was it. A door that could have opened slammed shut. Lamar stopped chasing dreams after that. He started chasing stability. Years blurred together, town to town, job to job. He never had a record, never got into trouble. He just survived, quietly. By the time he arrived in Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't looking for a new beginning, just a steady paycheck. The school district offered benefits. Summers were quiet. He took the janitor position without blinking. He liked it in his own way. Predictable, clean work. Students left him alone. Teachers smiled politely. He didn't expect friendship or connection. He didn't need it. He kept his head down, cleaned up messes, and disappeared before the last bell rang. But numbers never left him. Sometimes when he passed a math class, he'd glance at the board, see a formula, and finish it in his head. It was like muscle memory, a part of him that stayed sharp, even when everything else got buried under routine. He'd go home, make himself a quiet dinner, grilled fish, brown rice, maybe some carrots, and flip through an old engineering book he kept tucked behind the cereal boxes just to see if he still had it. He always did. He just never had a reason to show it. Until Mr. Taylor called him out that day. And now things were shifting, not just at school, but inside him. He thought about the kids who waited outside his supply closet with questions. Thought about Wes Hanley stopping by that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Jenkins, I tried to solve that same problem. Can you check it for me?" Lamar had gently, carefully explained where Wes had gone wrong without making him feel foolish. Wes smiled when he finally understood, not just out of pride, but out of connection. That kind of thing stayed with you, but not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Taylor, for one, had gone quiet. Too quiet. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. Something about being shown up in front of your class by a man you never thought twice about rattled him. He didn't lash out, but his tone got shorter, his patience thinner. And when someone mentioned Lamar in the lounge, he changed the subject. He wasn't used to being outshined, especially not by someone who'd been invisible to him until now. But life had one more twist waiting, and this one brought him right back to math. They were the first to change, the ones who used to pass him in the hall without a second thought. Now they stopped to say good morning. A few even asked for help with homework between classes. By the end of the second week, a small group of students had formed what they called the Dorsey sessions. They'd meet in the library after school, notebooks open, heads bent, listening as Lamar explained concepts with a clarity no one expected, but everyone respected. Then came the teachers. Most were supportive. Mrs. Lynn, the physics teacher, was the first to swing by the library and watch him work with the students. "You've got a gift," she said softly, "and I don't mean just with numbers." But not everyone was happy. Mr. Taylor hadn't said a word about Lamar since that day. In the teacher's lounge, he acted as if nothing had changed, but the bitterness was clear in his silences. He spoke in short sentences, never looked Lamar in the eye, and never mentioned calculus. When a parent-teacher meeting brought up Lamar's growing influence with the students, Mr. Taylor said, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between teaching and inspiring." On the surface, it sounded polite, but the tone made it clear. Everyone heard it. The principal didn't let it slide. One morning, he brought Mr. Taylor into his office and laid it out plainly. "I know it stung," Mr. Everett said, "but Lamar didn't embarrass you. He inspired them." Mr. Taylor shifted in his seat. "He's not qualified. He's more educated than we realized. More importantly, he's reaching kids in a way none of us have." Mr. Taylor opened his mouth but didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Meanwhile, Lamar kept to his routine. He didn't ask for a title and didn't want special treatment. But when the principal offered him a modest stipend to keep the tutoring sessions going, he accepted, not for the money, but because it felt right. He started carrying a small binder with him. Inside were pages of problems, blank worksheets, and notes he had written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and scribble formulas from memory, occasionally nodding at a passing student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D.1, afternoon, Carly." The student who filmed the original clip stopped him by the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar thought for a moment before answering. "I wanted to build things, teach later, but life had different ideas." "Well," she said, handing him a fresh mechanical pencil, "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." But behind all the good, there was tension brewing. Some parents had started calling the school. Most were supportive, but one anonymous complaint hit the board. Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students in a school setting? Is he certified? Has he been background checked for instruction? Mr. Everett handled it swiftly. He's an employee of the district. He's done nothing wrong. And if concern was really the motive, they'd have spoken with me directly. He never told Lamar about the complaint, but Lamar could feel something in the air. Not resentment, but resistance. It was like some folks didn't know how to place him now that he didn't fit neatly into the background. Then, one afternoon, Mr. Taylor did something no one expected. He walked into the library during one of Lamar's tutoring sessions, quietly watched from a distance as Lamar explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After about 10 minutes, he stepped forward. "Mind if I sit in?" Mr. Taylor asked. Lamar looked up. His expression didn't change. He nodded toward the chair. "As long as you don't mind learning something." The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Mr. Taylor smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day, said little, but it was a start. But Lamar wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Lamar Dorsey, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to be remembered. He was just showing up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he used to be. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library would fill with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Lamar walked students through math problems they once feared, not because he had all the answers, but because he made them believe they could find those answers themselves. That's what stuck. There was Isaiah, the freshman who nearly failed algebra last semester, now solving quadratic equations without looking panicked. And Tasha, who used to hate math, now leading mini sessions on weekends for her cousins using Lamar's notes. He never stood at the front like a traditional teacher. He sat beside them, talked with them, asked them questions before answering theirs. Gradually, more teachers started dropping by, not to supervise, just to learn how he was doing it. Mrs. Lynn asked if she could adopt some of his explanations for her class. Coach Rivera asked if Lamar would help set up a summer prep group for incoming freshmen. Even Mr. Taylor, hesitant and prideful, stopped by regularly, not every day, but often enough. He'd quietly offer an extra problem or two, and eventually began offering words of encouragement to the kids. The edge in his voice had dulled. Something in him had softened. One day during a tutoring session, Mr. Taylor lingered after the students left. "You know," he said, looking at the board, "I used to think this job made me important. The teaching gave me power." Lamar didn't interrupt. "But you've reminded me what it's really about, showing up, making it count." Lamar just nodded. "We all lose our way sometimes." He didn't hold grudges. He didn't need to. A month later, Principal Everett called Lamar in again. There was a proposal on the table to formalize his sessions into an elective class next semester, not for credit, but enrichment. A bridge between students and their own confidence, he said. "We'll have to jump through some hoops," Mr. Everett warned. "But if you're willing," Lamar shook his head gently. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I don't need the title. I'd rather keep it simple. Let the kids come because they want to, not because it's on a schedule." Mr. Everett nodded. "Then we'll support you however we can." Word spread beyond the school district. A local reporter stopped by to interview him. Lamar kept it short. No dramatic story, no self-promotion. "I'm just showing them what they already have inside," he said. "Sometimes it takes a little time to see it." In the spring, Eisenberg High hosted its annual student showcase. There were science projects, art displays, choir performances, and in one corner of the gym, a booth titled Dorsey's Table, displaying student-written reflections on math, life, and confidence. Dozens of students had written about how Lamar helped them see more in themselves, not because he gave them answers, but because he listened and believed. By the end of the night, people weren't asking, "Is he the janitor?" anymore. They were saying, "Yes, that's Mr. Dorsey. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood by the table, smiled, and thanked the students who came by." Later that evening, back at his apartment, he pulled out the old Purdue sweatshirt from the box under his bed. He didn't put it on. He folded it neatly, placed it in a new storage bin, and added a folder filled with student thank you notes beside it. Legacy, he realized, isn't about titles. It's about what you leave behind in others. He didn't need to finish school to teach. He didn't need a degree to lead. He just needed to show up every day and care. And that's exactly what he planned to keep doing.